All right, hello. Hopefully everyone's well hydrated, ready to resume. I think maybe, is anyone down the hall there, Randy? Can't see anyone? All right, so we have Bill Chesnut. Hey? There we go. Azure MVP, hopefully to be re-awarded MVP very shortly. We're all anxiously awaiting the news. And so we are going to hear why Logic Apps are better for integration workloads. I'm going to set a challenge for Bill. I'm going to see how tough the audience is. Who loves Logic Apps? That's not even an answer. There you go. I think 3 people partially like it, so I think you got a good challenge.
Well, I guess the other question is, who works in integration workloads? Who's building integrations? Yeah. Because that'll kind of change the answer.
Let's rock and roll, Bill. Looking forward to this one. Thank you.
Just getting the recording ready to go and everything. So yeah, part of this was driven by one of my clients that we built a nice Logic app environment, and their developers would rather write code than do visual design. So they switched to function apps, and their support people struggled. So here's a little bit about me. And the good thing is BizTalk goes out of support in 2030. I'm going to retire about 2030, so my Twitter handle works. So the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about integration workloads. What's the difference kind of with integration workloads than some of the other workloads that you have? Some concentrating on some of the supportability issues, because that's one of the things, especially I see as a consultant. We go in, we build all this stuff, we walk away from it, and somebody else has to support it. So, and the options that we have, so Logic App Standard, Function Apps, Web API. I'm going to really put Function Apps and Web API together because it's code. Talk a bit about Logic App Standard, talk about the Function Apps, some testing. I've got a little bit in the demo of a new thing that's coming. It's in preview now. And if you're interested in writing your Logic apps in code instead of the visual designer, Wagner Silvera is going to be talking on Integration Down Under Thursday night at 5 p.m. on the new SDK that allows you to do that. So let's get started. So one of the things I mean about integration workloads is typically you don't have control of both ends of the equation, because somebody's sending you data, you're processing it, putting away in one of your systems, or you're sending data out to somebody else. So that opens up the fact that things can change that are out of your control. Also, what we've seen a lot of times is, does everybody have perfect test data for when they're building things? Yep. I've been in the business 40 some years now, and test data is always the challenge. Because what will happen, and what we've seen in a couple of projects I've done recently, is they'll go into the test system and enter some data. And they tend to, because the testers are doing it, they tend to fill in everything. Where when you go to the production system, they don't fill in everything. So the test data will have all the fields you expect. You go start against the production data and there's fields missing. And the thing is, in their specification, it says those fields will be there. So then when you go live with it, and that's one of the things that happened to me. Building some stuff for a client, we did function apps. I didn't build the code, but I ended up having to debug it because all of a sudden we went into the test environment, it was using some live data, and all of a sudden it was failing. And I was getting that wonderful error of object not set to an instance of an object. and there was a very large try-catch around it, so it could be one of 25 things happening in there. The only way I was able to fix it was I actually took the message from production into the dev environment, loaded up the code in the debugger, and stepped through it. Support people probably aren't going to go to that point to fix it. So, and the thing is, you also get what I've run into in a few instances, this, even if it's a SaaS application. So I've done stuff with SuccessFactors and ServiceNow and Salesforce. Somebody will decide that we're putting a new project in and go make a modification to one of those that changes the data that's coming to you. So all of a sudden you're getting something different. And it's something that probably should have gone through change control, but they said, oh, that particular thing's not live yet. So it happens. And again, the other thing you end up running into, I do a lot of EDI work. We get third-party systems, their network goes down, things like that. So where we get errors where things are timing out, how do we restart them and things like that. And that's one of the advantages we'll see in some of the Logic App side of things. And again, how easy is it for non-developers to look at something and figure out where it's failed? I guess one of the things I've actually thought about, especially with the AI stuff, is would AI just, when we're building the code, we tell it to check every field? And as a developer, you wouldn't have done that, but AI, you may tell it to go check every field. And the thing is that with the function apps, the try-catch, you could wrap try-catch around every single thing, but then you're going to end up with code that's almost unreadable because you've got so much wrapped around it. And then the other thing is how easy it is it to restart the process? And this is one of the things I've run into with EDI, because an AS2 message will come in, we'll decode the AS2 message and it'll be fine. We'll send the MDN back to the customer saying that we're able to decode the AS2 message, but then we go process the body of the AS2 message, so an X12 or an EDIFACT message, and it fails, and we need to fix something and restart it. But when we send back a second MDN for that same message, they get a little excited. So that's one of the things is we'll see with the Logic Apps is some of that restart inside of the process. So our options for integration workloads typically are Logic Apps. Previously, it was things like BizTalk on-prem. And again, I started with BizTalk in 2002. So the actual doing visual design of workflows is something that's kind of ingrained in me. And before that, I was actually doing SSIS. And how many people have done that? And that, again, is another primarily visual designer. You're dragging shapes, connecting them, things like that. Mitch Denny was a classic one. When I first got to Australia in 2000, they started the .NET user group because .NET 1 was in beta. And he said, no, I don't like BizTalk because you can't write it in Notepad. So that was his mark. If I can't write it in Notepad, I'm not interested. So, and if you look at the Logic app, there is JSON behind the workflow. You could write that in Notepad. You wouldn't want to, but you could. And then there's other things that the function apps that's come along since then. And basically it's made it a lot easier for those timer functions, service bus messages, things like that. Before that, you would have to write a Windows service that would wake up and sit there and start polling for things or look at the service bus queues and things like that. One thing I'm not going to talk about is some of the Data Factory and some of the third-party tools, the other kind of integration tools in the market. So Logic Apps. So one of the nice things I like about Logic Apps is the 1,400 plus connectors you have to different ecosystems. So you can get started with like ServiceNow, Salesforce. There's connectors out there that will present you with a schema of what you want to do. There is a little bit of reason you may not want to use that. Is we basically, in the one project, we ran into an issue where we were just, the cost of the managed connectors was blowing out. So we did end up in that project. Once we knew everything that we needed to build, we switched over to creating a OAuth token and just doing an HTTP call with the kind of the same payloads. The visual run history, I think, is one of the keys to why Logic Apps works better in integration workloads, because I can open up that run history and I can see where it failed. And the thing is, sometimes where it fails is not where the problem's at. So it'll be trying to find a field, but that field wasn't in the payload to start with. And I can actually walk back up that run history, find out where it parsed that payload, and see that there's missing fields. So that's one of the things. And then the other one, and I'm not sure if everybody's aware of this, is the restart at an action. So that's where if you get things that are timing out to a customer's website, you can actually go and restart at that step or at that action in the workflow and continue forward, which makes it a whole lot easier for a lot of things to restart. One of the things that I also do is that typically in a workflow, if I've got a failure, I catch that failure in there and I log out the run ID of the workflow that failed, and I usually send those to teams with that run ID in there. So they can go open the workflow, paste that run ID in the run history, and it'll bring up that workflow that failed. So, and that basically gives you everything you need to do to try to debug that, where you don't have quite that same thing if you're going into functions and diving into App Insights trying to find it. And I'm not sure about you, but there's got to be a better science on how to cut down the noise in App Insights, because there is so much stuff there. Some of it's helpful. We've used it in the past where we had some functions running and they were running really slow. We couldn't figure out why, but we were able to go into App Insights, look at the dependencies, and we saw a SQL query that was taking 2 minutes. And then we were able to fix that SQL query. But that piece of it is typically the unusual side of it, where the failures, it's harder to find. So with function apps, it's all code. So basically you're writing the code. The 1,400 connectors are coming to function apps. They have got a preview out there right now. So you're going to be able to use all of the Logic App connectors in your function apps. So that kind of mutes the reasoning behind the connectors for your function apps. But again, you also get minimal logging out of the box. So typically, if you just connect App Insights and you don't add any logging to it, you get kind of the start and the stop, and you get the request coming in, things like that, a little bit of the dependency logging automatically. You can build as much logging as you want to in there, but again, you're battling that point where you've got so much logs that you can't see the problem for all the logging. And we ran into, they didn't have the log analytics set to consume enough data in the day. So one of them, we got 5 hours of logging a day before it decided it had used its quota for the day and stopped logging. So that didn't really help a lot either. So, and again, you can build all your custom JSON serialization, XML serialization, all that validation in there in your function apps. But it really depends on your data. If there's a big payload and there are like 5 or 6 fields that have to be there, you can validate those. But if there's 25 fields that may or may not be there, it makes some of that validation a little bit harder. So, unit testing. This will be a little bit controversial about that. For integration, unit testing, in my opinion, is not really helpful because you're going to be feeding in canned data that you know what it looks like. It's going to run through, do the mappings, or do a failure depending on what you're trying to test in your unit test. So what I really, in all the integration work I've done, even in the BizTalk days, I did more integration testing. But integration testing is a lot harder to set up because you either have to do clean database backups, and if you're using databases, you have to do clean backups. But again, you're still doing a lot of canned data. You know what the data looks like that you're feeding into the integration tests. But they do help because they will look at all of those systems. I know that Logic Apps have got some unit testing in them now, and they've got mocking ability to mock your endpoints. You can do the same thing in function apps. And even now, you don't even bother. You just get Claude to write your unit tests for you. So now we'll hop into a little bit of a demo on this. So if we've got a, let me just get to the right one of these. So if we've got a function app here, we've got some JSON data for an employee that's got some shift hours and things like that. We've got a simple function that goes down through there. And one of the things it's doing is it's assuming that it's got shift data. Let me just do. Is that better? Yeah. So yeah, it's making some assumptions that it's got the data there. Visual Studio is getting better for that because you'll notice that it's got the little green line under there saying that may be null. But there are a couple of flags you can set in your project that will turn that off. So depending on who set the project up and whether they didn't want to see it or not. But basically, if we start this up, and how many knew that the REST thing works in Visual Studio? I didn't discover it till about a month ago. I've always used it in VS Code, the REST extension. So it's just basically you're doing a simple post. So let's send that request. So that one got a 200, everything was happy. And there, so basically let's go down, and what I've got is you'll notice that this one's got the shift data with the shifts and the hours. This one's missing that data. So if we try that again and send the request, because we're in debug mode, it takes us right there, but if we were running this in Azure, we would get back the 500 object not set to an instance of an object. And depending on how much stuff was in your try-catch is how much stuff that you had to go look through. And the fact that you need to go either have that payload logged somewhere or archived somewhere to go and see what data came in. And so that's basically kind of the idea behind the functions side of things. But again, I mean, you could still build the functions to validate the data that you needed to validate and then reject it. But again, this particular example that I had was The document said they will always be there. The first time we ran it in test environment, they weren't there. But it was, and what it was an edge case that a new employee had been created, but hadn't got far enough through the system to get the shift data built. But that was not any of the testing that any of the testers did. It was a very extreme edge case. So, and I don't know if anybody knows success factors, but it's about 14 products put together. So sometimes it works like you expect it to, sometimes it doesn't. So if we then hop over here to our Logic Apps, and let's look at, see if we can get, it decided to load a new runtime too today. So we'll see if it, see if the designer will come up. Yeah, I will when I get it up. Okay, let's just cheat and use the run history on this one. So basically we see that we've got a very simple workflow. Is that, and basically we get a payload, we parse the JSON, we go pull a variable out, and we send the response back. And we can see that we can actually see pretty much everything that came in. And the other one that's really nice is that we can see the raw parts of that, but we can also see a lot of the information if we need to from the headers and things like that. And that's one thing that has helped a lot, is that we got some headers that were wrong that came in. Then we can parse the JSON, and we can see that all the information parsed. We can see the variable that it found. It initialized the variable, found that. And the nice thing is you can actually go look at the actual code that the Logic app was executing for that particular action. And all of those, you have that, the code, because this is what runs into, because you'll go in here and then you'll take that sample payload and you'll parse it, use a sample data to parse it, and it has a tendency to put a lot of things required, and sometimes you have to go fix that because sometimes they don't come in. And then you get the response, and you can see that response that was sent back. Now if we go back to another run that I did without that bit of data, you can see here that we get a failure. We got a red failure there. But if you look at that, it's like, okay, unable to initialize the variable. That's almost as good as object not set to an instance of an object. But the fact that we can go back to the parse JSON and figure out that there's no shift data. There's basically all the data we've got. We can look at the schema here and say there's supposed to be shift data. So then we can go here, look at the code view, and we can say, oh, okay, we're trying to dig into the shift data. Now, I did fudge this a little bit because by default in Logic Apps, it puts question marks between the segments to handle nulls. But when you're actually using something for a calculation, when it brings back a null, it's probably not going to help you anyway, because you're going to fail on the next step when you're trying to use that to do something. So in there between those segments, if you have a question mark in there, it'll handle the nulls, and you can check that. So basically, it's really that visual ability to go look at the run, and look at the run history, and be able to see where it's failed. Because the thing is, if you drop it out as a failure, you put a message in Teams, support people go out, they grab that run ID and basically paste that into the run history, and it shows them that workflow that failed, and then they're able to. And then what they could do is that you can do, when you have this running, you can say submit from this action. Now, one of the other things that people don't realize is I can actually update my Logic app, deploy it with a fix, and rerun that instance with the new code. So if you do figure out a problem in your code, fix it, deploy it, and then you can run that payload through again. There is some PowerShell too that you could actually grab the run IDs and resubmit all of those runs. The one thing that won't happen is that when you have that HTTP request and response and you do a resubmit, it knows it can't send the response back because the caller's gone. And a lot of times that's not going to help you because they want a response back. So you might look at more of a pattern where you accept a message and then put it on a service bus queue or something like that, process it, and then send them the acknowledgement back that says that we've got the message, and then send them another asynchronous message that said it's been processed and here's the details about it. And that's a little bit the way, if you've done stuff with EDI, Edifact or X12, they have a asynchronous acknowledgement that it's processed. So now I'm going to, are there any questions? Yes? Oh, let me unmute that. Hold on.
All right. So one of the, it's great to start with. We know Logic Apps does what the work is. But one of the things that one of my customers actually discouraged Logic Apps, which is kind of like I didn't have an answer back then. I'm not sure how improved now. Basically, assume that you see all the data, like all the employee data and all that.
Yep.
Now, we don't have a control of where the data is stored because it's actually out of our control where the Logic App is storing that data. So back then, there are two reasons. One was even the access tokens and all that was logged. Like the token response was logged in that.
Yep.
Second thing is like if that employee data or health data, for to be more particular, they falls under the PII data. And then we can't store PII data on a system that we don't have a control of, and therefore, sorry, we can't use it. Is there a better way to say, I know that we can control the access to who can see this, but is there a way that where it's stored, can we actually introduce storage or something that says, no, you got to keep your run history in this in a storage that we have control, because in function app we can do that.
Yeah, so there's not a function built into it that way. You can tell it that is secure data and it will not log it. So in the actual, each action, you can say that the input's secure and the output's secure and you don't get any logging from it. You would still get the failure at that initialized variable and be able to look at the code associated with it so you'll know what it's looking for. But you would have to, and what I would do is that I've done in the case with EDI, is that I've actually sent the data to a Cosmos DB that I controlled. And the logging was there with the run ID. So you could take the run ID, go into Cosmos, find the data that you want to look at the line that failed, and look at the code and be able to put those two together so that you don't have that logging.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, so because basically each one of these, basically you can set in the settings is that secure input, secure output, and it will not get logged. And it will not show up in the run history.
And doesn't mean that it stores it and not showing, right? It doesn't even store it.
No, does not even store it. Because they knew the same thing as you. PII data, personal data, stuff like that that you don't want available can't be stored. Because this is the replacement for BizTalk, which did heaps of HL7 stuff, which was all medical data. And you didn't want it anywhere else. So yeah, you've got all of that. Any other questions? Yep.
One small question. So, like, can you
Wait till him to bring the microphone to you so that we can get it on the recording.
Yeah.
There you go.
Hello. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I just only got one small question. So
Yep.
can you write tests for this thing? Because I reckon, like, at some point, then the logic would get more complicated than that. Then you would
Yep.
want it to have like handlings for different scenarios, like when one field is there, when it's not there, and things like that. So at some point, like, I would imagine it would go from this very simple logic to like some kind of logic that branches out like a lot of times. And I reckon, like, if you don't have a test for it, then
Yep.
at some point it
So
would be. Yeah. Thank you.
you can do, there's basically and I'm trying to remember where that triggers that in there. There is I don't know whether it's in the, create unit test from run. So if you look at that thing at the top, it creates a separate project at the bottom that is a unit testing project. It will actually take the data from that particular run and use that data to create a test. So they've done a lot of work in that unit test side of things to be able to do those unit tests. And it basically mocks out the endpoints and basically allows you to create the unit tests and then run the unit tests. And you can, I know that they're working on it. I don't know if they've got it in there yet, but they were working on the ability to be able to also run those unit tests when you commit the code.
So Bill, on those unit tests, what sort of verification or assertion can I add? Like, how does that work?
It basically generates C# unit tests.
Great. So, yeah. So that, like, I can imagine, like, because I haven't seen this, right? So
Yep.
I can imagine it's got the payload in the code somehow on a file. Somehow it references that.
Yep.
Runs some sort of execution, and then you can just do all your assertions on the output.
I don't know whether this will work or not, but we'll try it.
YOLO. Let's do it. Let's see what happens. No. Computer says no. Yeah. You put a computer on the spot.
Yeah, so, there is a talk out on, I think there's a talk out on Integration Down Under that goes into the unit tests.
I could add, from having done it, actually worked with Logic Apps, which I am a fan of, I would say that is actually one of its limitations because you have a very complex nested workflow. And if you have connectors that are not necessarily a HTTP call,
Yep.
it does have limitations. And so you can have, I would describe it as smoke testing unit test, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But deep, rich, nested layers, the unit tests become unwieldy. You can't run them in the cloud unless you jump through an enormous
Yep.
CI/CD. They're good for local.
Yep.
But yeah, I was flagged that from having done it, complex workflows become untestable at a point due to their complexity. And if you're using non-HTTP connectors or whatever, they can't be mocked. And so you're unable to effectively do a unit test.
Yep. They are working on that. It's one of the top things that they're working on at the moment around some of that. So if there's no other questions, I'll show you.
One more. All right, will be the last one. We'll move over.
The submit from action option seems very handy, especially when you have failures and you want to replay the payloads, right?
Yep.
Let's say in a production environment where you have hundreds or thousands of failures, and you made a fix to like the previous step, and now the payload is correct. So is there an option to do a batch run, of all the failures?
Basically, there used to be with the Logic App consumption, there used to be a add-in for log analytics that would do that for you. But there is PowerShell or REST API calls that you can pass the run ID. So you can actually go into log analytics, get all the ones that failed at that step because you've got that step history in log analytics. And you got the run ID, this step failed, and you can get a list of those run IDs, and then you can feed those into a REST API call to restart that workflow.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thanks, Bill.
Okay, now I want to show one other thing is they've got a new project called Codeful Workflows. And this is using the new Logic App SDK. And this is this is a very simple workflow. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. Where's the, no, wrong one. What is it, Control Plus? Okay, let me just get rid of that. So basically, this is a workflow written in code using the new SDK. So basically, you define your trigger. You define this get current weather action. And then you define the response. And then you basically define how the workflow runs, and then you create a stateful workflow with that. So this, to me, will also probably make it easier for a lot of the AI agents to write Logic Apps because it's all code. But the one thing that I was very impressed with from it is that we've been talking about the run history. Do I get run history out of this code? So if we look at the overview, this is my success.
Oh, the suspense.
Yeah, something went wrong. That's what it's going to do.
Oh dear.
Let me just go there, actually. Let me start the debugging up again. And the difference is, too, you know, in a standard Logic app, when you wanted to look at the run history, you had to look at the run history. You had to go to the workflow and look at the run history on that workflow. Yeah, this one's running, I think. Yes, of course. They insist on sharing the same.
You don't need the compile to have Randy.
Start with debugging. So the nice thing about the way they've done the codeful stuff is that you'll see that there's a run.cs. You can get an overview of run.cs and it will show you all of the workflows in this that are codeful and give you ability to select which workflow you want to look at the run history for. And of course that didn't. Okay. Let's see if we can get one of these to come up. So, one of the things is that this Thursday night at 5 p.m. Melbourne time, Wagner Silvera from the Microsoft, it's not going to come up. It's not going to cooperate. Let's try to run it one more time. Oh, there's debug. Let's go overview.
Oh, looking good.
It's trying to do something
better.
there at the bottom. Let's just see if we can get it to start. Wagner Silvera is going to do a talk on the SDK, which is basically this code. And he'll basically walk you through that, what you need to do for that. Okay, that looks like it did it. Run the trigger. Okay, that's running one. That refresh. And that was just then, so we click on that. we got run history. And basically, we've got all the same stuff that you expect to see in there. So you can, and you can have both normal workflows and codeful workflows in the same Logic Apps standard project. So if you got something,
So does that mean?
Microphone.
So does that mean that, like earlier on, we had this problem of that Logic App? If you had run a complex like calculations or something, we'll be writing like a half dozen lines of JavaScript, like all that. Can we do that in C# now?
So basically, what you can, there's two ways of doing that now. Okay, if you look at if you create your Logic App with custom code, it actually creates a function project in your Logic App, and those functions are of a type of workflow function trigger or workflow trigger. And so it doesn't go outside the Logic App. It basically does a binary call into a DLL that gets compiled. And that's what we used in the project when we converted from our managed connectors to using custom connectors with OAuth tokens. Getting an OAuth token in a Logic App is a pain in the ass. Getting it in 30 lines of .NET code is easy. So that's what we had, is we had a function over there that we called, that went off and got the OAuth token, brought it back, and we had code in there too that it even stored the token in storage, knew when the expiry date was, so it could actually reuse the same token for whatever the token life was, because the token life would come back in that call to go get the token. So we basically saved a lot in that. So you can do that in there. There's also going to be, and Wagner will cover more of this when he, on Thursday night, there is a custom code shape for these codeful workflows that you can write blocks of C# code in. Not JavaScript, because I hate JavaScript. But that's one of the things that they have thought about, is that being able to write those other pieces of code in there. So
Bill, just in that workflow, one CS, right?
Yep.
Nice, straightforward, sequential workflow.
Yep.
I guess we're getting some sort of fluency notation here to do branching, then something else, or how do you?
So basically, it would be you're defining that conditional action, and then it's kind of the way I saw one of the examples that he did. He did a talk for build. You can go out and find the build talk about what's new in Logic Apps, and it basically kind of nests it underneath that action. So you'll have a if-then type block where you've got the two sides of your condition,
okay,
and
cool.
you can create more of those actions. And you'll notice that workflow action.managed is using a managed connector. So that actually was going out to Azure to a managed connector and coming back. But then there's your built-in trigger. It could be a workflow trigger managed that was going out to ServiceNow or Salesforce, things like that. So all of that stuff they've thought about in there. They don't have quite all of the managed connectors there yet, but they have added a bunch more connectors to the built-in connectors so that you don't have to go use the managed connectors. So, okay, so let's hop back to my slides real quick. So basically that, and again, I reiterate that kind of sometimes consultants and developers forget about somebody having to support this stuff after they walk away from it. And that's one of the things that I think that helps with the being able to look at that run history. And again, even if we have to block out data because of those issues, we still know what step failed easily without digging through App Insights and things like that. And again, AI may solve all of these issues. We may be able to just point it at App Insights and it tells us that this is the line that failed in our function app by looking at the data. But again, we'll have to have that data stored somewhere so it can actually look at that. So, and again, here is wwaintegrationdownunder.com. If you go out to that, that'll give you the details about the talk. And we do it at 5 p.m. on this Thursday, and it'll be on YouTube Live about a couple hours after that. And then you can go view it. And if you go to the Integration Down Under page, let me just see if I can get there on one of these browser windows. You'll see the talk and the live stream link, but you'll also see the 20 previous talks. And at the bottom, there's a link to the full playlist, because there's about 60 out there now, I think, from Integration Down Under. And if you've got something you want to talk about, just get in touch with me and we can get you a slot. So, for Integration Down Under. That was one of the guys I know in Belgium did it, and he used the AI to create his Australian core cat. So, okay, that's pretty much all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. That was really cool, actually. I wonder, from the questions before, who likes Logic Apps? I think after that, I like it a fair bit more. I actually think there's some good uses for that now. I can, as a pro coder, that's very enticing. So I don't know if anyone else's minds has been changed a bit. I don't know. Well, yeah.
I'll ask one more question and I'll give that full.
All right. Well,
can we start using other libraries that you already written?
Oh, okay. So just to repeat the question, with these new Logic Apps, Bill, can we import NuGet packages, other packages we've always used in the new Logic Apps?
If you do the custom code Logic app, in that function, you can add whatever packages you want.
Like a single C# file, we can bring in all the NuGet packages on the top.
Well, basically, you just you get into the function project directory and you do .NET package add.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because we used it for PGP, encryption and decryption, because that had always been a pain with the Logic Apps. You'd have to call out to another function sitting in Azure somewhere, do the decrypt, but then you're bringing it back unencrypted. So yeah, you can add those. We did run into one issue. I tried to cheat, because with the Logic App standards, you can't. Each one of your parameters is a line in the environment variables when you deploy. I tried to hook up to app config in the function, and it broke. And it broke at the most inopportune time. It worked for a while. They deployed a new version of the runtime, and it broke. So yeah, there's a couple of things there that's one of my asks at the moment, is a way to hook up app config to where you don't have to define the variables. So.
All right, we got a new adopter there. Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Any other questions? All good? All right, thank you, Bill. All right, so thanks for coming, everybody. If you're interested in doing a talk here next month or any of the months later, reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, go to our Discord channel there, just ask a question, and I'll get you hooked up, I'll get you a spot here. So thanks very much, and we'll see you all next month.